The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, the kind of message you never expect to see after 2 decades of loyal service. Claire stared at the screen, her heart pounding as if it had been replaced by a jackhammer. The words blurred and sharpened in an endless cycle. Your position has been eliminated due to restructuring. 21 years. 252 months. More than 10,000 days of showing up early, staying late, and building the company's marketing department from a one-woman operation into a powerhouse that generated millions in annual revenue. All of it dismissed in 3 clinical paragraphs. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the attached severance package details. The numbers didn't add up, not just financially, but morally. She'd been earning $185,000 annually, a salary she'd worked tirelessly to justify through results rather than mere tenure. Yet buried in the HR jargon was the real reason: salary exceeds current market rates for similar positions. Translation? She'd become too expensive, too successful, too valuable to keep around. The irony wasn't lost on her. Just last quarter, she'd spearheaded a campaign that increased company profits by 37%. The CEO had personally congratulated her during the annual meeting, calling her the backbone of our success. Now, that same success had become her downfall. Claire felt the bile rise in her throat as she remembered something her mentor used to say: in corporate America, loyalty is a one-way street. She sat back in her ergonomic chair, the one she'd bought herself when the company refused to upgrade their standard office furniture. Her eyes scanned the corner office she'd earned through years of sacrifice: the framed awards, the handwritten notes from grateful clients, the photograph of her younger self with the company's founder. Each item told a story of dedication, of sleepless nights and missed family events. And now, they were asking her to walk away from it all because she'd done her job too well? Her phone buzzed incessantly, colleagues checking in, friends wanting lunch updates, automated calendar reminders. She silenced it without looking. The weight of 21 years pressed down on her chest like a physical force. Outside her window, the city bustled with its usual chaos, oblivious to the personal earthquake shaking her world. A bitter laugh escaped her lips as she realized the cruel symmetry. She'd started on a Monday, fresh out of college with stars in her eyes, and now she was being shown the door on another Monday. The HR meeting played on repeat in her mind, the forced smiles, the carefully rehearsed platitudes about new opportunities and industry changes. They'd even offer her career counseling services, as if a woman who'd built an entire department from scratch needed help finding her next move. The final insult came when they asked her to assist in training her replacement, some hotshot MBA graduate half her age, brought in at a fraction of her salary. Efficiency experts, they called it. Claire called it what it was: corporate cannibalism. As the reality settled in, anger began to replace shock. Not the impotent rage of a victim, but something more dangerous, the focused fury of someone who knows exactly what they're worth. She stood up, pacing the room where she'd celebrated countless victories and weathered numerous storms. Every step echoed against the walls that had witnessed her evolution from eager intern to respected leader. 21 years of institutional knowledge, of relationships cultivated and maintained, of battles fought and won, all reduced to a severance check and a lukewarm handshake. Claire stopped at her window, staring down at the bustling streets below. The city seemed unchanged, yet everything was different. She could feel the gears of her mind beginning to turn, calculating possibilities and weighing options. This wasn't just about losing a job, it was about having her life's work dismissed, her value quantified and found wanting. As she watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across her office, a decision crystallized within her. They thought they could discard her like yesterday's news, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. No idea at all. Monday morning arrived with a clarity Claire hadn't experienced in years. Dressed in her favorite power suit, the deep navy one that had closed more deals than she could count, she stepped into the downtown coffee shop where she'd arranged to meet Samantha Chun. Sam wasn't just any old contact. She was the tech prodigy Claire had mentored 5 years ago, the brilliant coder whose startup had quietly revolutionized data analytics before being acquired by a major firm. Their connection ran deeper than professional courtesy. Sam owed her first major contract to Claire's recommendation. "Still drinking your coffee black?" Sam asked, sliding a steaming cup across the table with a knowing smile. The young entrepreneur's eyes sparkled with intelligence, but Claire detected something else there too, curiosity mixed with concern. Word traveled fast in their circles, and Claire knew her departure hadn't gone unnoticed. "I've always believed in keeping things simple," Claire responded, taking a measured sip. Unlike certain coding languages I could mention. She raised an eyebrow, watching Sam's cheeks flush slightly. The dig was gentle, but purposeful, a reminder of how far her protégé had come under her guidance. Their conversation flowed naturally, touching on industry trends and mutual acquaintances before Claire steered them toward her real purpose. I need access, she said simply, setting her cup down with deliberate precision. To everything you know about corporate data structures, internal communication systems, and, let's call it creative solutions to information management. Sam's fingers paused mid-text on her phone. You mean hacking, she clarified, her voice barely above a whisper. When Claire didn't respond directly, merely raising her eyebrows in that particular way that had always made subordinates squirm, Sam leaned forward. Look, I get it. They screwed you over big time. But this isn't like you. You were always the one teaching me about ethical business practices. That was then, Claire replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. Now I'm talking about leveling the playing field. They wanted to treat me like disposable talent? Fine. Let's see how they handle someone who knows every single weakness in their system. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table, a list of names, dates, and brief descriptions that would make any corporate spy salivate. These are contacts I've maintained over the years. People who owe me favors, or better yet, people who have their own scores to settle. The younger woman studied the list, her expression shifting from disbelief to something approaching awe. You've been planning this since before Friday, she accused softly. It wasn't really a question. I've been preparing for possibilities my entire career, Claire corrected. This just happens to be one I never expected to use. She signaled for refills, buying herself a moment to observe Sam's reaction. Loyalty was a tricky thing in their world, but she'd always invested heavily in her network. Now it was time to collect dividends. One by one, the pieces fell into place. Mark from IT security agreed to meet for drinks, ostensibly to discuss freelance opportunities, but really to share insights about the company's firewall vulnerabilities. Jessica, the former intern who'd risen to become CFO at a rival firm, provided detailed analysis of their financial weaknesses. Even Greg, the maintenance supervisor who'd once threatened to quit after his hours were cut, proved invaluable with his knowledge of office routines and security protocols. Each meeting followed a similar pattern, casual conversation leading to strategic revelations, wrapped in layers of plausible deniability. Claire operated with surgical precision, never directly asking for compromising information, yet always guiding the discussion toward useful details. Her years of experience taught her the art of gathering intelligence without leaving fingerprints. By Thursday evening, her apartment had transformed into a command center. Whiteboards covered every available wall space, color-coded notes tracking patterns and connections between departments. Spreadsheets documented everything from peak server usage times to executive bathroom schedules. What had started as righteous indignation had evolved into something far more calculated, a masterclass in corporate counterintelligence. Yet beneath the meticulous planning, Claire couldn't ignore the growing unease in her gut. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was becoming something bigger, something that could potentially reshape the entire landscape of their industry. As she reviewed her assembled resources, a realization dawned that chilled her to the core. She wasn't just fighting back against her former employer. She was positioning herself to change the rules of the game entirely. Friday afternoon found Claire navigating through the crowded corridors of the convention center, her pulse quickening with each step. The annual Tech Innovators Conference had drawn thousands of industry professionals, but she moved through the throng with singular purpose. In her designer tote bag rested 3 USB drives, each containing meticulously prepared presentations tailored to specific targets she'd identified throughout the week. Her first stop was the keynote speaker's green room, where she knew Marcus Trent, the up-and-coming AI specialist whose groundbreaking algorithm had caught her eye 6 months ago, would be reviewing his notes. Timing was everything. She entered just as he was packing up his materials, his security detail hovering nearby. Without missing a beat, she approached, hand extended. Marcus, wonderful presentation, she praised, deliberately using the familiar tone of someone who'd already established rapport. Your insights on neural network optimization reminded me of our conversation at CES. Have you had a chance to review those case studies I sent? Confusion flickered across his face for a brief moment before recognition dawned. He'd never met her before, but she'd been carefully cultivating his social media presence, commenting on his posts, engaging with his content. To him, she was just another influential contact in a sea of networking opportunities. His body language shifted, becoming more open as his security team relaxed. "These might interest you further," she continued smoothly, slipping the first USB drive into his hand along with her business card. "It contains proprietary research that complements your work perfectly. Something tells me you'll find it enlightening." The subtle emphasis on certain words wasn't lost on him. Industry veterans understood when they were being handed opportunity wrapped in mystery. Her next target proved more challenging. Victoria Langham, the ambitious venture capitalist known for her ruthless investment strategies, was deep in conversation with several potential partners. Claire waited patiently near the refreshment station, observing the dynamics until she noticed Victoria's assistant stepping away momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, she approached the empty seat and placed the second USB drive discreetly under a stack of papers. "Ms. Langham," she interrupted politely, "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I believe you'll find the comprehensive market analysis in your folder particularly relevant to our earlier discussions about emerging technologies." Their eyes met, and Claire saw the moment Victoria processed the significance of the word earlier. They'd never actually spoken before. The slight widening of her pupils confirmed she'd taken the bait. The final USB drive required the most delicate handling. Alexander Price III, scion of an old-money industrial dynasty, rarely attended these events unless compelled by family obligation. Claire spotted him lingering near the exit, clearly bored and ready to leave. She positioned herself strategically, allowing him to bump into her as he turned. "My apologies," she said brightly, steadying herself against his arm. "These crowds can be overwhelming. Though I suppose you're accustomed to managing complex systems, aren't you, Mr. Price?" The name drop was intentional, as was the subtle suggestion in her tone. From her purse emerged the third drive, casually left on a nearby table as she reached for her phone. "Speaking of which, I believe you'll find this proposal regarding legacy system integration quite compelling. Your grandfather would have appreciated the historical parallels." As she watched Alexander pocket the drive with practiced nonchalance, Claire felt the first stirrings of satisfaction. Each USB contained customized Trojan horses, designed to infiltrate specific sectors of her former company's operations. The AI specialist would unknowingly expose their research division's vulnerabilities. The venture capitalist would gain access to their financial projections, while the industrial heir would compromise their manufacturing protocols. But the true genius lay in the timing. She'd seeded each drive with delayed activation protocols, ensuring simultaneous breaches exactly 7 days from now. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the damage would be irreversible, or at least, that was the plan. The variables were infinite, the potential outcomes ranging from minor disruption to complete corporate meltdown. Standing at the convention center's main entrance, Claire reviewed her mental checklist. 3 targets engaged, 3 payloads delivered. The infrastructure was in place, the dominoes set to fall in precise sequence. Yet instead of triumph, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. She created something far more complex, a web of consequences that would ripple through the entire industry. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, an encrypted message from Sam confirming the backup servers were ready. The young programmer had exceeded expectations, creating fail-safe mechanisms that would allow Claire to maintain control even if things went sideways. Trust, Claire realized, was a double-edged sword. She'd spent years cultivating these relationships, only to weaponize them now for her own purposes. The convention floor buzzed with the energy of innovation and ambition, hundreds of professionals networking, sharing ideas, and forging partnerships. Claire blended seamlessly into the crowd, her presence as unremarkable as it was calculated. Tomorrow was Saturday, and with it came the critical phase of her plan. While others enjoyed their weekend, she would be executing the most delicate part of her strategy, establishing the groundwork for what came next. Sunday morning broke with an unusual stillness, the kind that precedes significant events. Claire woke early, her mind already racing through the day's objectives. Today wasn't about dramatic actions or high-stakes confrontations, it was about planting seeds that would grow into something far more substantial. She dressed in casual business attire, the uniform of someone attending informal meetings rather than formal negotiations, and headed to the first of several carefully orchestrated encounters. Her initial destination was a small cafe favored by local entrepreneurs. Here, she met with 3 former colleagues who had departed the company under various circumstances over the years. To an outsider, it would appear to be a simple reunion, but Claire had chosen these individuals specifically for their unique perspectives on the company's inner workings. Over lattes and croissants, she guided the conversation toward shared frustrations and untapped potential. "You know," she mused, swirling her coffee spoon thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about how many talented people we've lost over the years. Not just employees, but entire departments outsourced or downsized. Imagine what could be achieved if all that expertise was redirected elsewhere." The statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. She watched as understanding dawned in their eyes, each one recognizing the subtext without needing explicit explanation. From there, she moved to a shared workspace facility, where she'd arranged to meet with 4 independent contractors who had previously worked with the company on various projects. These were the unsung heroes of modern business: graphic designers, copywriters, marketing specialists, who understood the company's consumer-facing strategies better than most executives. Claire listened intently as they discussed recent campaigns, noting areas where the company's traditional approach had grown stale and predictable. "The market's changing faster than ever," she observed, leaning forward conspiratorially. "And yet so many organizations cling to outdated methods. It's like watching dinosaurs trying to adapt to a new climate." She allowed a meaningful pause before continuing. "But what if someone gave these dinosaurs a push in the right direction?" The afternoon found her at a private tennis club, engaging in doubles with 2 key players from competing firms. Between volleys and serves, she dropped carefully crafted observations about industry trends and market vulnerabilities. The exercise served dual purposes: maintaining her cover as a recently unemployed executive exploring new opportunities, while simultaneously testing the waters for future alliances. Most crucial was her evening appointment at a discreet restaurant, where she dined with 3 former board members who had rotated off the company's leadership council. These were the real power brokers, individuals who still maintained influence through stock holdings and advisory roles. Over candlelight and vintage wine, she painted a picture of possibility: not revenge, not destruction, but transformation. "It's fascinating how companies evolve," she remarked, cutting into her filet mignon with precision. "They start as innovative disruptors, full of promise and potential. Then somewhere along the way, they become institutionalized, risk-averse, focused more on preserving the status quo than pushing boundaries." She locked eyes with each board member in turn. "But what if we could create something different? Something that retained the best aspects of corporate structure while embracing the agility of startups?" The response was immediate and telling. Questions began flowing, probing for details she wasn't quite ready to reveal. Yet she answered each one with just enough information to keep them intrigued, careful not to tip her hand completely. By the end of the meal, she had secured tentative commitments from each board member to participate in a series of brainstorming sessions that would occur precisely when she needed them most. Back at her apartment, Claire reviewed her day's accomplishments while preparing for Monday's execution phase. The groundwork had been laid, the players positioned. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted during these interactions. What had started as a personal vendetta was morphing into something larger, a movement, perhaps, or a revolution in corporate culture. The wheels she'd set in motion weren't just targeting one company, they were challenging an entire system of doing business. Her phone buzzed with incoming messages, confirmations from her network, status updates from Sam, and several unexpected responses from today's contacts expressing interest in exploring alternative opportunities. Claire smiled grimly as she powered down her devices. Tomorrow would bring the moment of truth, but tonight belonged to preparation and reflection. The chessboard was set, the pieces aligned. All that remained was to make the opening move. Monday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that promised transformation. Claire stood before her bathroom mirror, adjusting her signature navy suit with deliberate care. Each button fastened represented a decision made, a line crossed. The woman staring back at her bore little resemblance to the eager intern who had started 21 years ago. This Claire was hardened by experience, tempered by betrayal, and driven by a purpose that transcended mere revenge. The Uber pulled up to the company's headquarters precisely at 8:45 a.m. She stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement with authority. Security guards nodded in recognition, old habits died hard, and she'd trained them well during her tenure. The lobby bustled with the usual Monday morning energy, employees rushing to meetings, interns balancing coffee trays, and executives making power walks to their offices. Everything appeared normal, yet beneath the surface, Claire knew chaos was brewing. She bypassed the elevators, choosing instead the emergency stairwell. Her footsteps echoed against the concrete walls as she ascended to the 15th floor, her former domain. The fire door opened soundlessly, thanks to regular maintenance schedules she herself had implemented. The hallway stretched before her, familiar yet foreign. Temporary nameplates marked doors where her team had worked, now occupied by strangers she'd never hired. Her first stop was the server room. During her tenure, she'd insisted on maintaining physical access points for emergencies, a policy she justified as prudent disaster recovery planning. The biometric scanner recognized her fingerprint immediately, though her access should have been revoked. Inside, rows of blinking lights and humming servers greeted her like old friends. She connected her laptop, executing commands with practiced efficiency. The Trojan horses she distributed at the conference would activate in precisely 15 minutes, but she needed to establish her primary control point here, in the heart of the system. Moving quickly, she accessed the backup server room on the 4th floor. This was where the real game would begin. The company's entire digital infrastructure depended on these mirrored systems, and she'd spent years ensuring their redundancy capabilities were flawless. Now, she would turn that reliability against them. Each keystroke triggered pre-programmed sequences that would cascade through their networks, exposing vulnerabilities while simultaneously creating new pathways for her to exploit. Returning to the 15th floor, she entered what had once been her office. The new occupant, a young man who'd probably graduated from business school the year she'd received her last promotion, sat at her old desk, scrolling through emails. He looked up, startled by her sudden appearance. "I'm sorry," he stammered, standing abruptly. "This is a restricted area." Claire smiled, a predator's grin that made his Adam's apple bob nervously. "Not for me," she said simply, producing documentation that verified her temporary consulting status, paperwork she'd forged with help from her legal contacts. "Corporate wants me to conduct a thorough review of departmental efficiencies. You must be Derek, isn't it?" She didn't wait for confirmation, moving past him to plug her laptop into the docking station. The screens lit up with displays he couldn't possibly understand, real-time monitoring of the system breaches she'd initiated. Data streams flowed across multiple monitors, painting a picture of corporate vulnerability. She watched his confusion transform into alarm as alerts began popping up on his own workstation. "What's happening?" he asked, panic creeping into his voice. "Change," Claire responded cryptically. "Something this company desperately needs but refuses to embrace." She tapped a few keys, initiating the next phase of her plan. Email servers began rerouting messages, financial records synchronized with external databases, and project management systems opened backdoors she'd cleverly embedded during her final weeks. Her phone vibrated continuously, messages from every corner of her network. The board members she'd courted were convening emergency meetings. Venture capitalists were analyzing the compromised data. Competitors were positioning themselves to capitalize on the chaos. Yet Claire remained focused, her attention divided between monitoring system responses and documenting every action she took. The true brilliance of her strategy lay in its multifaceted approach. While the technical breaches would cause immediate disruption, the real impact would come from the human elements she'd manipulated. Those former colleagues she'd met with on Sunday were already spreading rumors about impending layoffs. The independent contractors were leaking information about upcoming projects to competitors. The board members were questioning the wisdom of recent cost-cutting measures that had led to her termination. Time seemed to compress as she worked, each minute stretching and folding upon itself. The building's usual rhythms continued around her, phones ringing, printers whirring, conversations carrying through thin walls. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, the foundations were shifting. She could feel it in the air, taste it in the recycled oxygen pumping through the ventilation system. When the clock struck 10, marking exactly 1 hour since her arrival, Claire initiated the final sequence. Across the city, carefully selected individuals received notifications on their secure devices, evidence packets, strategic briefs, and tactical instructions. The Trojan horses she'd planted at the conference had successfully breached their targets, creating a network of compromised systems that would take weeks to fully contain. But Claire wasn't finished. She activated the fail-safe protocol Sam had developed, ensuring that even if her access was discovered and terminated, the processes she'd set in motion would continue. Like a virus adapting to antibodies, her infiltration methods would evolve faster than they could be neutralized. The company's entire digital ecosystem was now interwoven with threads of her design, invisible to the naked eye but structurally vital. As she prepared to leave, she took one last look at the office that had once defined her existence. The young man, Derek, was frantically typing, trying to comprehend the scope of what was unfolding. She almost felt sorry for him. He was just another cog in a machine that valued cost efficiency over human capital. Almost. Walking through the hall she'd once commanded, Claire felt the weight of what she'd accomplished settling over her shoulders. This wasn't just retaliation, it was reformation. The company had tried to reduce her to a line item in a budget spreadsheet, but she transformed herself into something far more significant, a catalyst for change in an industry desperately in need of it. The lobby clock read 10:45 a.m. as she pushed through the glass doors into the sunlight. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her pocket, notification after notification stacking up. Yet she ignored them, focusing instead on the city skyline stretching before her. Somewhere in those towers, her former colleagues were scrambling to contain the crisis she'd unleashed. Others were seizing opportunities she'd created. And still others were beginning to question everything they thought they knew about corporate loyalty and value. As Claire slid into the back seat of her car, she finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. The weight of what she'd done settled over her, but there was no regret, only resolve. She knew the company would eventually trace the breach back to her, but by then, the damage would be irreversible. Her phone buzzed again, and this time she glanced at it. A single message from Sam read, *Phase 1 complete. What's next? Claire exhaled slowly, her lips curving into a faint smile. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. The city buzzed around her, oblivious to the storm she'd unleashed. Somewhere in those towers, executives were scrambling, board members were panicking, and competitors were circling like sharks. And through it all, Claire had become something far greater than a wronged employee. She typed a response to Sam, *We wait. Let them feel the chaos they created. Then she added, *and prepare for phase 2. The car pulled away from the curb as Claire leaned back, closing her eyes. Revenge was sweet, but power? Power was sweeter. For 21 years, they had underestimated her. Now, she would show them just how costly that mistake had been. Through the tinted window, she watched the headquarters grow smaller in the distance. It was no longer her prison, it was her masterpiece. A monument to what happened when you pushed someone too far. And as the city swallowed the building whole, Claire whispered softly, almost to herself, "Let the games begin."